Well, hello and welcome back to another edition of Stampede Radio. I'm your host, Chris Blystone, and I'm joined, as always, by Jim Campbell and Chris Shepard. Guys, how's it going?
Hey, Chris.
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited that we get to talk about some playoff football. This is the last Stampede Radio podcast before we hit Wild Card Weekend, and so we're going to be talking about Colts Bills, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about some of those other games. At the very end of the podcast, we make some predictions about how this week's going to go. But really exciting game. I think a game that could be very entertaining. We're going to dig in. We got, obviously, on the last podcast, a pretty good representation of the Bills, and got to hear from some guys talk that follow the Bills more closely and hear their kind of perspective on everything. And now we're gonna dig in and see what the film has shown Shepard, and we're gonna really take a close look at how the Colts can try to get a victory and move on past Wild Card Weekend. So got that coming up. First, before we do that, let's take a look really quickly at the injury report. Final injury report is out, and it's not terrible. It definitely has been worse at different times of the season. Not really surprising that it's relatively positive, because we just haven't had a whole lot of injuries late in the season, fortunately. But did have DeForest Buckner listed as questionable for the game. He was out 2 practices this week and then had limited practice on Thursday and then was listed as questionable. I personally have no doubt he will play. He did the same thing last week. I think it's really more about mitigating wear and tear on a sore ankle. He may not be 100% of himself, but also I think in the last game where he sat out like this, didn't he come in and record a couple sacks, or had a bum ankle and had a really good game against Houston? He's been fine. So I'm not worried too much about DeForest Buckner. Obviously, you'd like to not have him on that list at all, but he's going to get through. So Will Holden, tackle, is out. He hadn't practiced all week. That's not the end of the world, but obviously tackle depth is still thin, and that is definitely a little bit rough. Hopefully everybody stays healthy, and we can't afford to lose any more tackles. That would not be a good situation. And the only other player that's out is Rocky Sin. And he's in concussion protocol. He would have been really nice to have in this game, but TJ Carey has done a really good job. So I'm not sure. I haven't watched them both carefully enough to say definitively that there's no drop off, but I think honestly they've played pretty comparably to one another. I think that you never want to be losing anybody who is a starter quality player, but obviously concussion protocol in a short week makes it tough to come back from that. Hopefully he's back if they manage to get a win next week. So otherwise, no significant injuries to speak of. Jonathan Taylor was limited with a shoulder issue that we talked about on the last podcast. That's a little bit concerning, but also he's a running back going through a season where he carried the ball a lot. So it's not totally surprising that he'd be struggling with some issues. So it could be they just wanted to give him some rest, and that's why he was limited in practice this weekend. And most importantly, Kari Willis is back. And we talked about on the last podcast how important that was going to be. And we'll talk more about him later in this podcast for sure, because he is a big part of that defense, and good to have him back in the mix. Any concerns as far as who's going to be available that you guys are? I mean, do you think also that like I do, that Buckner is probably going to play, or are you more nervous about that? Or
I mean, I think short of like having to use a walker to get around, DeForest Buckner is probably going to play. I just think that's just kind of who he is. But at the same time, I feel like he's been dealing with this ankle injury for a while now. And I looked at it today, in the last 5 games of the season, the guy had 7 sacks in the last 5 games. And then he had two sacks on definitely a bum ankle. And then I don't remember when the ankle injury happened exactly, if that was the 3-sack game or the game after. But either way, he's been very productive with a hurt ankle. Reich said that it was maybe getting better. But yeah, no, I don't see that there's, I mean, short of a major setback, I don't think there's any way he doesn't play.
And I think his maybe I think the 3-sack game was what his career single game high.
Yeah,
possibly.
that's right.
On top of that, so somehow he's actually breaking his own career milestones on a bum ankle. So yeah, I think he'll play.
He's having himself a 2018 T.Y. Hilton type of season where he's just perpetually banged up, but he's still able to show up. And if I recall correctly, that was the year we won a wild card game. So just
all right. Well, and I believe
thought early off here.
Those 3 sacks also came off of fairly limited snaps too.
Yeah, he was
mostly relegated to third
50,
down, and
I think he was about like 50% snaps compared to
that's right.
really significantly more. So he was very productive. So absolutely. Well, so not really a whole lot more to talk about as far as injuries there. Now the injuries on the Bills side, a couple that we definitely want to pay attention to. Stefon Diggs is on the injury report, but if you paid any attention to some of the Twitter activity from them and some of the beat writers, the way that they talked about it made it pretty apparent that he was on the injury report like DeForest Buckner is on the injury report. I would be really surprised if he's not playing. And I heard Bills fans kind of joking around about, like, somebody said, that Sean McDermott throws a towel in the training room. Hey, I think I saw your towel in there. And then here goes the guy following him in and oh yeah, I saw him in the training room. That guy was in the training room when he talks to the media. So he's maybe a little bit of a master of deception as far as injuries are concerned. Not totally surprising. Cole Beasley is one I'm going to be watching because obviously he's been banged up for a couple of weeks, got a knee injury, and he is kind of their zone beater. So if he's in the game, that makes a big difference, specifically with the Colts defense. If he's not, I think that's a significant loss for them. Doesn't necessarily mean they won't be able to move the ball effectively, but obviously if you can be one less weapon, there's value in that. So somebody to keep an eye on as the inactives drop and see who actually is on the field at that point for them. But anyhow, as far as news goes, the only other news, and I wanted to talk very briefly about this, we talked a little bit right before we went on air, because tonight there has been a ton of rumors surrounding Deshaun Watson really all day long. And being in the division that is worthy of a little bit of attention. And one of the things that's come up is that basically the new general manager is Nick Caserio. He's hired from the Patriots, and he's a pal of man. I cannot remember this guy's name to save my life, but Jack Easterby. Yeah, Jack Easterby. I should. The next best thing to happen to the Houston Texans, if you're a Colts fan, from Bill O'Brien. Jack Easterby. Apparently, the conversation was had with Cal McNair between he and Deshaun Watson that Watson was going to have some involvement or say in the GM hiring and or the head coach, not the GM hiring, the head coach hiring, excuse me. And the rumors out there, I believe it was Rap Sheet that said this, but it was somebody of that ilk. It was not like just some random Twitter account, said that basically he was told that he was going to be involved in that process. He asked for Eric Bieniemy to be considered after having conversations with Patrick Mahomes, and really was kind of pushing for him to be interviewed. They did not give him an interview. So he was pretty upset. And the last thing you really need to do when you already know that you've got a franchise passer who's going to be playing for a garbage team for a couple of years at least. Let's be honest, best case scenario, if the Texans completely turned their organization around and hit on draft picks and hit on free agents and everything, they still are probably 2 to 3 years of insanely good general manager work away from being competitive in a real way. And Deshaun Watson is understandably frustrated. And if that means that they have to trade him away, that's a weaker AFC South. And that's obviously very good for the Colts. So we may have Trevor Lawrence coming in, but we also may have Deshaun Watson going out, which really would not hurt my feelings at all.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me, number one, that they gave him that they even told him, like, hey, we want to hear what you have to say about the coach. They didn't necessarily have to do that. He approached them if it was just to placate him and just to say, hey, okay, sure, fine. If you want to have that, the way that he made it sound, it was obviously him and his people have released this information because was coming. Yeah, it was coming from somewhere. It had to be them. And the way that they made it sound was that he obviously didn't care if he would want them.
It wasn't so much the person as they wanted the process to be different, right? Was how it was phrased.
The process, and also just the fact of like, hey, interview this guy. If you don't hire him, you don't hire him, but just talk to him, talk to the guy, see what you think. And that's literally all it would have taken to make him happy. To say, if he comes to you and says, hey, how'd the interview go? It went all right, but we like the way that this guy did this, or whatever it is. Like, you can just say, hey, we talked to him. We felt that, it was better to go in a different direction. At that point, you've done all you can to placate the guy and say, hey, we did what you wanted us to do. Now we're going to hire the guy that we want to hire. So it just seems like a stupid thing to do all around. Deshaun Watson's upset, which is good news. I hope Deshaun Watson stays upset.
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, it really is a huge failure to even say that you're going to do that if you don't intend to. I mean, it would be perfectly reasonable for them to say, look, man, you're the star quarterback, and we want to do everything we can to involve you in our success. But this is not an area you have any control in, and we're not going to bring you in to consult on this.
Right.
And if you say that to him, like, it may make him mad, but it doesn't make him as mad as if you yank him around and treat him like an idiot. I mean, you treat him like you're going to give him a say and then absolutely don't.
It's also not super surprising. The McNair family has not necessarily had the greatest, comments and outlook on their players.
Yeah. They're not exactly a franchise that we've seen ruled by competence for sure.
Well, not even just competence. I think there's just a lack of respect for their personnel.
Sure.
I mean, some of the greater, national media figures in some cases give Jim Irsay some crap, but and maybe some of it is well deserved, but even though he's come through a lot and clearly pushed through a lot of issues and done it publicly.
Yeah.
His players love him.
Well, and you can't say that he doesn't care about his players, because while he's flawed, he clearly does care about his players as much as any NFL owner can, because ultimately they are, it's a business.
It's a business.
They're trying to profit, but he, as much as anybody can, does care about his players.
Well, I mean, it helps that he also, legitimately loves being a football team owner, not just a billionaire. He likes doing his job, and he seems to genuinely care for the players in his care. And I would argue, he's paying them, but they're in his care, while they are, his players. And he seems to genuinely take that to heart. And I have never assumed the McNair family cares at all about their players in any way, shape, or form. Even their star player, who almost could have dragged them to 11 wins if the rest of the team didn't suck.
Well, regardless of Bill O'Brien's power or involvement in the structure, you don't get rid of a superstar like DeAndre Hopkins without consent of ownership, and so that tells you a lot about their leadership and everything. So anyway, it's all good news for the Colts. That just means there's one more franchise that's poorly run in our division that we get to kick around for multiple years, and they might even be stupid enough to trade Deshaun Watson to the Colts. It's hard to tell. I don't think that they're that inept, but you never know. I mean, I would have never thought anyone would trade away DeAndre Hopkins, still fully capable for a running back who with injury history that is already on a contract that's bloated. That doesn't even track to me.
Unless you bring Al Davis back from the dead, you offer him a really fast wide receiver and a first round pick. I don't think anybody would trade Deshaun Watson within the division. But I mean, you could be right. You never know.
I wouldn't trade him in the conference.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well,
get him out of town as far as
you might be a better general manager.
I am an idiot in comparison to present company, and I know I'm a better general manager than the last at least 3 that have walked through the doors in Houston.
Oh, man. All right. Well, enough about the Texans, because they're irrelevant. They're not in the playoffs, and they're not going to be for a long time.
DeAndre Hopkins is what, 3rd? in receiving yards this year. That must really suck for them.
Yeah, he's obviously washed up. They definitely got the better end of that deal. So let's
Good
get
on
into
him.
this game. We've got an exciting game. I've been hearing both the national media. I mean, we heard it on the podcast talking to Greg earlier in the week. We've been hearing a lot of positives about the Bills, and that's deserved. And because the Colts have kind of played a little bit lukewarm over the past few games, they've been inconsistent, and the defense hasn't been quite as good as they were early on. There's been a lot of pretty much just the foregone conclusion that the Colts don't really have a shot in this game. I've heard a lot of that from a lot of Colts writers and people who follow them carefully, and I don't know that I agree with that assessment. I'm interested to dig into all of this. I think this is going to be a good game. I'm not saying that I think the Colts necessarily could win or will win necessarily, but I definitely think they could. I think the Packers game proved that they're up to challenging a very potent offense and capable of doing that. So I'm interested to dig in, and I want to start on the offensive side for the Bills and look right away just at Josh Allen and the year that he's had, because there's no doubt that it's been excellent. People who don't know Josh Allen maybe don't realize how good he has been this year, because I think if Aaron Rodgers wasn't bent on embarrassing the Packers ownership for drafting somebody first overall at quarterback, or not first overall, first round at quarterback, you're talking about Josh Allen as maybe the runaway MVP candidate. He's just had a crazy year. I think he's got like 45 touchdowns, 37 passing touchdowns, and I think 5 interceptions. I mean, it's been a fantastic year. He's done some things that have just been crazy by comparison to the player that he was last year. So no doubt that he's a very good quarterback. What did the film show you, Shepard, about how he's played so far this season and the way that the Colts can expect to try to deal with what he's going to do to them?
So yeah, I mean, you said it all. I think Aaron Rodgers, I think, is the MVP, but I think that you could make a legitimate case that it should be Josh Allen. The guy's really, really good. He's good throwing the ball. He's good running the ball. Just seeing the difference that has come in his game from the time he was a rookie until now. Every now and then he'll still throw an errant pass, right? He's still going to miss a ball every now and then. Every quarterback misses a ball every now and then. But he's a much more accurate passer than he used to be. You can tell that the work he did in the offseason with whatever quarterback guru it was, I don't remember now, but you can tell it's actually made a difference. He's actually corrected some things. He's able to throw the ball with touch. You actually see him. He will float a ball and fit a ball between an underneath receiver and fit it in underneath the over top receiver. Those are things that he couldn't do a year ago, 2 years ago. So he's a complete quarterback. How can the Colts look to slow him down or stop him? You've got to keep him in the pocket because he is a legitimate threat to run it. You look at him, 6'5", kind of a goofy looking Caucasian kid. You don't think this guy's going to take off, but he can. He's a good athlete.
Where we've seen that before.
Man, I'm still haunted by the 30-yard out run that you posted on your feed of him breaking one up the middle, and he just hits a hole that a running back would barely hit. I mean, he absolutely is a fantastic runner in the open field and seemed to have a good eye for when to run, not just that he can run, but that's what really I think makes the difference for some of those guys is knowing when to run and when to throw.
And so not only that, but also the fact that he uses his athleticism to extend plays a lot too. He's really good extending the play. He's really good when the play breaks down. The kind of thing that you expect from Baker Mayfield. This guy is like the NFL quarterback version of that, like Baker Mayfield wishes he could be. When the play breaks down, he's really good. He gets outside the pocket. If he starts to feel pressure and he takes off and runs, he's fast. He can break a tackle. On that run that you're talking about, he broke a tackle and got in the end zone. The guy's a good runner, great passer. You've got to keep him in the pocket, and you've got to get pressure up the middle. And then on the back end of that, you've just got to play really good coverage. Basically, you just have to be perfect. And if you're perfect, then yeah, no problems. We'll shut him down. We'll stop him. No big deal. Just got to be perfect.
I'd like to take a moment that you basically just said that Josh Allen is the NFL quarterback version of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. Yeah. He's what Baker Mayfield thought he was going to be. Yeah.
So one of the things that I wonder about, and I don't know what all games you watched of his, but I immediately was drawn to the Titans game because the Titans completely thumped them earlier in the season. Now, this was before their bye. This was well before they hit this hot streak of just torching everybody they played. So it's fair to say that you can't really compare football that was taking place. I can't remember when this game actually took place. I don't know if it was in November or not. I feel like it may have been earlier. No, it was early October. So it's really hard to compare October football to anything going on in December because teams are still figuring out who they are and all of this. But they had 3 turnovers, didn't run the ball particularly well. That's not something it seems like they really work on that much. And we'll get into that obviously a little bit later. Why would you run the ball if you can throw the ball so successfully? Right. But they obviously took the ball away. There were some interceptions and they couldn't score. But I wonder if there's a formula in terms of maybe the smartest thing, and the thing I think that the Colts have had the most success on defense is forcing teams to make long drives, not giving up big plays, which I know they can definitely come up with. But if you were to force the Bills to make these long drives, it gives more opportunities to take the ball away. The Colts have proven they're very good at that. They may be able to be perfect. The punter has, I think, punted like the least. I think it's like third least in NFL history or something like that. I read some stat about their punter and just hasn't gotten a lot of usage. But if you were to really keep the ball in front of you and force them to make these long drives, it just creates more opportunities for failure. Even if they're successful, I think maybe the best option that the Colts defense has is not to necessarily. They need to take the ball away. I would think that probably is one of their best ways is to capitalize on turnovers and maybe to force them into these long drives and not give up deep plays.
So that's really great in theory, and I think that it's something that's possible. But the Bills. So I didn't watch the Titans game. I didn't break it down. I broke down more recent games. I think I pulled film on 3 and I watched a 4th, and there were the later games in the season. But so the Bills are really good about taking underneath shots. They're willing to throw, a 5-yard in. They're willing to throw a curl. They're willing to throw another 5-yard. They're willing to pick up yards after catch. Whatever they can get, they're willing to move the ball downfield like that. And about the time that the safeties start to bite up because they're tired of seeing those 5-yard plays turn into 10-yard, 12-yard gains, with the run after catch, that's when they're going to go to the Yankee concept. They're going to run a guy underneath at that 5-yard level. They're going to wait for that safety to bite up, and they're going to throw it over the top to Stefon Diggs. And again, if the Colts can be disciplined and they can stay back and play their coverage and play where they're supposed to and not give up that play to Diggs over the top, yeah, absolutely. But the Bills are really, really good at making teams bite up and taking those shots. And even if the safety stays back and covers deep, if they catch you in man coverage, Stefon Diggs is going to run away on that 5-yard crosser from whoever it is that's trying to cover him. So, in theory, that's a good idea, and I hope it works.
Yeah, well, they're certainly going to have their work cut out for them. Stefon Diggs is having a fantastic season, receiving yards leader in the league, his best season as a pro. Clearly a good fit for the Bills. It's a weird trade where everybody won because the Vikings are also really loving their first round receiver is it Van Jefferson? Is that the name of the guy they drafted? I can't remember the name of the receiver. They drafted a receiver, and he's worked out like gangbusters as far as the draft pick goes. So I think everybody's happy in that arrangement. But obviously, Stefon Diggs has been pretty fantastic. But before we get into him, let's talk about the running game. Based on what you saw, is their lack of running game more of a factor of just disinterest in utilizing it because they don't need to, or are they actually not that talented as far as their running backs?
So, I mean, I would say it's probably a little more the fact that they don't need to necessarily run. Their offensive line's actually decent, but their running backs aren't. They're nothing to write home about. They're just guys. They're guys that if you block it for 4 yards, they'll get you 4 yards. If you block it for 3 yards, they'll get you 3 yards. They don't create much on their own. They're not plotters, but they can hurt you if you don't go out and play your gap assignment. But they're not even in the top 10 backs we've seen this year. So no, they're nothing special.
Yeah. So I guess who are the guys other than, I mean, we've talked about Beasley a little bit, that he is this kind of the zone beater guy, the fast guy that's coming across the middle. Stefon Diggs obviously is a threat all over the field. Who are we going to need to watch out for in terms of receiving threats over the middle? I assume is going to be some of where they're going to target. Who are the players on the Colts defense that really need to have the most significant games as far as their performance goes to really make this game even just competitive?
Sure. So outside of Diggs, obviously Cole Beasley, like you said, but Gabriel Davis, guy's averaging like 17 yards a catch as a rookie. He didn't have very many catches on the season, but 17 yards of reception. He had like 600 yards. Guy's a big play threat. Really, though, the only guy I'm concerned about, Beasley's a solid player. He's solid underneath. The only guy I'm really worried about is Diggs. They really don't need anybody else. In the last month of the season, Stefon Diggs just put on a show. I mean, everybody knew they were throwing the ball to him, and it literally did not matter. He's just so good. So really, when you're talking about who needs to have a big game, our safeties have to have a big game. You've got to have Julian Blackmon, Kari Willis. They've got to stay solid in coverage. And then, Xavier Rhodes, really wherever he's at, whoever he's on, he's got to play as well as he possibly can and stay healthy.
So I'm looking right now to find this because I have. Okay, so Devontae Adams, early season, doing the same kinds of things. I think he was having the same kind of early season as Stefon Diggs is having in the late season. He was on fire. Colts face Green Bay. That's a guy we're really worried about. He has a good game, but I don't think anybody would say that he took over that game. There was no feeling ever that he specifically took over. I feel like he didn't have a whole lot going on until later in the game, which obviously was a pretty intense part of the game. We go into overtime. He made some plays, but I feel like Xavier Rhodes handled him relatively well. Is that a situation where we think Xavier Rhodes tries to kind of follow him? Do they really just rely on their technique and sound tackling and all of this to try to deal with him as much as they can? You assume they have to have some kind of a plan for him because obviously he is a critical part of the offense. What do you expect them to do to try to deal with him, or do you think it's just kind of business as usual? Do what the Colts do and try to execute better than the Bills?
So I hope that they bracket him. I hope that they put a corner underneath and they have a safety over the top. I don't know that they'll do that. I don't know. They might just say, this is what we're going to run, and we're going to run it, and we're going to do our jobs. That's fine. Xavier Rhodes, no corner should follow Diggs in this game because nobody can run with him. So if one guy's following him and they get matched up in man coverage, they're going to get burned. It's just send them deep. We can't keep up with them. We don't have anybody. I hope that they're willing to take him away. They're willing to do some creative things, give that bracket coverage. I don't know that they will. If I were the defensive coordinator, which there's a very good reason, there are a lot of good reasons I'm not, but if I were, that's what I would try to do. I would make them beat me with Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, Cole Beasley, whoever it is. I'm going to make them beat me with one of those other guys. I'm not going to let them throw to Diggs 15 times for 12 catches and 200 yards. I just wouldn't do it.
Okay, so we talked about DeForest Buckner. We talked about his ankle. The offensive line.
That was my next question, actually.
Yeah, what does this offensive line look
Sorry,
like? Is this an area, the interior of the offensive line, that we can expect to hopefully be getting wins, even if we're not dominant?
Yeah. So their two tackles are both really good. Let me look. Got a lot of names in my head. Sorry. Okay, Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams, left and right tackle, respectively. Both those guys are solid. I didn't notice a lot on film of them really getting beat. And when they would get beat, Josh Allen was, ready to step out of the pocket and do what he does. So those guys are solid. Mitch Morse, he was an old Kansas City Chiefs center. He's actually pretty solid. He's a good player. The guy to the left of him, the guy to the right of him, Ike. Man, Ike, you just really, this is a name, Botiger. Man, I don't know. You suck. You're not a good left guard. And you dare to have that ridiculous name. Like if you're gonna be bad, at least be named Smith, and then the other guy, it's not much better, John Feliciano. So neither one of those guys are very good. We can expect whoever lines up over them to get some sort of pressure. Mitch Morse is going to help out with DeForest Buckner most of the game. That's not to say DeForest Buckner isn't going to get wins against those guys, because I think he can. But I think that whoever lines up over the other guard, that guy's going to have a lot of success.
It's going to be Grover Stewart time, basically.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, Grover isn't exactly known for being the fleetest of foot, fella. So, they might try Tyquan Lewis or somebody in there to kind of rush against him, because they should expect to get some wins. But we should get pressure inside, whether it's Ike or John. If whoever we get manned up against that guy, I hope that we see them use some sort of stunts. Send a stunt, blitz a linebacker off that try to confuse those two, because they are confusable. The tackles, if we get a win against one of those tackles, it's not surprising. It's not shocking. We have some guys that can win downs, but it's not something I'm going to count on. Really, I just want our defensive ends to keep him in the pocket, just not let him get outside, and really try to win up the middle with, well-timed blitzes and stunts and different things off of that.
Yeah. Well, Kamoko Touré's looked better in recent weeks, and hopefully he can start getting some wins up front. And obviously that makes a big difference if that happens. And, we did see, and this happened, with the Colts have the ability under Matt Eberflus to change up their game plan at times as they've needed to. He's good at adjusting. I actually really wanted to be playing one of the teams we'd already played, because one of the things I feel like the Colts do better than almost anyone is not getting beat by the same things twice. Although that does not apply to divisional opponents, but we tend not to, at least in game, not make the same kinds of mistakes. And I think that led to the defense having really good second halves for much of this game, or much of this season. So I'm going to be really interested to see how that looks up front. I would anticipate some stunts and definitely some blitzes. Darius Leonard coming right up the middle. He's done that. They did that a lot with Deshaun Watson. And I feel like they did a relatively good job of keeping contained with Watson, but he also made it really hard to deal with him. And I anticipate the same kinds of problems that Josh Allen is going to present, because how many times did we see them get hands on Deshaun Watson? And maybe that's maybe my next question is he the kind of guy who's as difficult to bring down as Deshaun Watson is, or is he just difficult to get a hand on in the first place? Because I know that that's not always the same thing. I mean, you get a hand on Deshaun Watson, it does not mean you've brought him down, and we've watched him shrug off Colts players in both of the games that they played. If Josh Allen goes down when they get a hold of him, obviously that makes things easier. But if they just can't get a hand on him, obviously it's a problem.
So, I mean, pound for pound, Watson's probably the stronger guy. But just looking at them, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, I would guess that Josh Allen's probably 30 pounds heavier than Deshaun Watson. He's just a bigger, more stout, thicker guy. I mean, from a body type perspective, you could compare them a lot to Cam Newton. They're built much the same way. They're very similar in their build. So, you could send Kenny Moore on a blitz and he could bring him down. But I mean, like if those two are running at each other in space, I hope Kenny Moore makes a business decision. I'm not going to lie. I want him to play next season. And it's just not one he's going to win.
Yeah. Well, so we haven't really talked about the tight ends. It's kind of my impression that this is a team that uses receivers more than they use tight ends. The Colts obviously use lots of tight end. They use tight ends on every play, multiple tight ends on many plays. And Dawson Knox is a player I liked, but the word that I got, I believe the comparison, the comparison I made based on what Greg's description of him was that he was a little like Eric Ebron, and probably Kobe Fleener would have been a better comparison in that he would make some of these spectacular catches followed by just mind-boggling drops and misses on plays. And I remember Colts fans' frustration with Kobe Fleener because that's exactly, he would make these highlight catches that he shouldn't be able to make and then drop a wide open pass in the middle of the field. And it seems like that's what they're getting from him. Should we expect them to utilize the tight ends at all, or are we just kind of think it's probably going to be mostly the talents in the receiver core and that's where they're going to stick?
They might look to him a little bit, but it's Stefon Diggs and then everybody else. I know I keep saying Diggs, but like watching those last 4 games of the season, it was just a Stefon Diggs highlight tape. Like I kept pulling plays, like I kept trying to find big plays or interesting concepts, and every single one of them seemed like it was Diggs. So they'll use Dawson Knox, not a lot. He's definitely not someone that I'm concerned about. I'm sure they'll have a plan for him because literally when your job is just to do football for 60 hours a week, you should have a plan for how you're going to cover their tight end. But from me and my perspective, with my limited time I put into this, I'm not even concerned a little bit about what their tight ends are going to do.
All right. Jim, how's it going?
Great. Sounds wonderful. I'm not concerned about their tight ends either.
All right, we're going to take a really quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to get into the defense. All right, and we're back. Let's talk about the defense, because this is an area where I think, at least, so this is my thought process, and you tell me if I'm wrong. And Jim, I want to get your opinion on this so that you get involved in the discussion, so that we're not just sitting here. It's fun to have you, hanging out with us, but it feels like you should be involved in this conversation a little bit.
You took my O-line question in the last one.
Well,
so.
Yeah, you just got to jump in there and push me out of the way. Just
yeah. I'm too courteous.
Well, what are you going to do? So I sort of wonder if the recipe on offense is to play keep away a little bit. That is a recipe that worked very effectively on the Colts in the Peyton Manning era. Don't give them very much time. The less time you give a very talented quarterback with the football, doesn't mean they can't beat you. Doesn't mean you still won't lose. The Colts won a lot of games with Peyton Manning, but a lot of times the teams we struggled with were teams that could take the ball away and teams that could force you on these long drives, but also who could keep the ball away from you and keep your quarterback, your best players, sitting on the bench. Is that the best approach for this team? Do we think I guess if we think that's the way to go, is that how you would plan this game plan out if you were Frank Reich?
Me? Yes. I would say the bulk of our success. Let me rephrase it this way. How do you play keep away? You run the ball and keep it out of their hands as much as possible. And the bulk of our success seems to have come off of our pretty phenomenal rookie running back. So that's I think always the plan in the grand scheme of things. For the most part, get out, get a lead, keep it away from them. Yeah. Done.
And the lead part is probably the important part. We got to figure out how
you got to do that. and unfortunately, that's not always up to you whether you have the opportunity to go up quick or not, because that's how football works. So, yeah, I mean, I would hope that is the primary game plan, which is just a picture of Jonathan Taylor said, "Give ball to this dude every time, or as much as you can." I'm sure it's definitely going to be more creative than that. I would hope so. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty much what it is.
Well, and I don't know that necessarily you have to game plan that way for everyone, but when you have a team that can score like they can, obviously you want to minimize the number of shots that they have.
Keep that out.
I mean, and it also, if you do that, if you manage to limit their possessions, you also increase the value of any potential turnovers that you have. If you create a turnover and you've limited their possessions, obviously it's a way bigger chunk of the game. If you take the ball away or if you get a stop, it's much more significant and important. So I think that's where they found some success against Kansas City last season. Obviously, they also benefited from Patrick Mahomes being hobbled and Tyreek Hill not being in the game. So both of those things have to be factored. But
small detail.
Is that how you anticipate them attacking Shepard? And do you think that this defensive line and in general the defense, how do they hold up against that particular type of attack?
Yeah, so in my opinion, that's the Colts' best shot to win this game. Is to, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it keep away, but to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands as much as you can. And the fact of the matter is that when you look at the Bills, they're not a good run-stopping team. Over the last 4 games of the season, they gave up almost 125 yards rushing per game, and they gave it up to the Steelers can't run the ball. The Broncos, who are just bad at football, the Patriots, who can run the ball but were not great at football, and then the Dolphins. But the Dolphins would have had more rushing yards had they not lost 56 to 20 by 30 points. They lost by 30 points. You're not running the ball a lot when you're losing by 30 points. So, they can't really stop the run. I think that they gave up more than 4.5 yards per carry on the season. So just the fact that they're weak stopping the run against a Colts team who they've been really, really good at stopping the run, it leads me to believe that should be really their entire game plan, is to just grind it out, keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, hand the ball off 30, 40 times. I don't know. If you're successful and you're winning, just keep doing it. That to me is the best chance the Colts have to win.
Well, and Jonathan Taylor's the hottest player on their team right now. I mean, in terms of his production, he's hit this last month of the season, and he's been incredible. So, I mean, he just won. I think it was like Offensive Rookie of the Month for December. He won the FedEx Ground Player of the Week from week 17. He has been on a tear, and obviously you want to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers, regardless of when it is, but in the playoffs especially, you need those playmakers to be involved. I was kind of hoping, and it looks like this is not going to be the case, hoping for some bad weather, to be honest with you. I was kind of hoping for it to be one of those nasty Buffalo games like we had. I don't remember when it was, 2018, with 2019. When was that awful game where there was like a foot of snow midway through the game and they were shoveling off stuff? And
Frank Gore was our starter at that point. Frank Gore was running in that. I
just remember players running over and kicking the snow out of the spot so Vinatieri could kick the football. I was hoping for
maybe 2016.
I don't know. I know Luck wasn't on the field.
Yeah,
I want to say
that was 2016. Maybe it was 2015 then, because 2015 or 17, either way, there was a lot of Luck not being on the field, so that's unfortunate. But, but
hard to narrow that down.
Yeah, I would have been pretty happy to hear that they were going to have pretty bad conditions, because I think that definitely would have favored the Colts. Obviously, they're comfortable with their home field and everything, but if it is nasty and it mitigates the ability to run the ball, that's obviously good. It's going to be 35 and sunny, and so it's going to be fine. But I do think that you ride the hot hand, and I also wonder, and I guess this leads us into the linebackers. What role should we expect Nyheim Hines to have? Because I always think he needs to get the ball more over the middle and get him the ball in the open field, and it just seems like no rhyme or reason to when that sort of blows up. but it does seem like every so often you have a game where he blows up, and that's exactly what happens is they get the ball to him in the short passing game and let him go to work. What role do you think he plays in it? Do you think he's going to run the ball a lot, or do you think that this defense is, as far as the linebackers are susceptible to him as a passing threat?
So the two main linebackers that they've got, Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, they're both really good. Well, okay, Matt Milano is really good. Tremaine Edmonds is a great athlete who makes some questionable decisions at times. So do I think that Hines could be effective in the passing game? Yeah, sure. I think against Matt Milano specifically, if he gets manned up one-on-one, Hines is a better athlete. He can beat him. I don't know that they're going to do that often. I don't know what the Colts think. Against Tremaine Edmonds, if Tremaine Edmonds guesses correctly, he's going to stick right on him. But if he guesses wrong, it could be wide open. So I don't know that I expect Hines to have a big game, but kind of like you, Blystone, I think that he could. I think that this is definitely a game where if the Colts feel that they have an advantage, I think that they could have an advantage there, but how much it's not, I don't feel great about it. Their linebackers are good enough that I'm not like, oh man, I can't wait to test those guys in coverage. I don't think they can take anybody away necessarily, but they're good enough to not necessarily try to test. There are other places I would go first rather than throwing at those guys.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Based on the feedback that I got from Greg, the drop off is pretty steep at linebacker. So obviously,
right.
In any injuries, it seems like I don't think are going to obviously be good for the Colts, but also there's some of that as far as players for the Bills that some backups are pretty not great.
Yeah, they're terrible. Yeah.
As far as the offensive line goes, though, for the Colts, they've actually played relatively well, especially when they're asked to run block. I would think that actually eases some of the strain on your left tackle. What did you see watching the left tackle? And I've forgotten who is playing left tackle for the Colts right now. But what did you see watching him? Do you think it's as a result of do you not remember it either now?
Yeah, like if you wouldn't have said it, I would have been able to give it to you. Played for the Raiders for a long time, right?
It starts with a V, right?
That is a good question, and I couldn't tell you right now.
This is good Colts podcasting right here.
Hey, if they'd stop changing, left tackles every, other game, it would be great.
Belvedere. Yeah, that's
Belvedere. Yeah. All right. I was stuck on Will Holden, and I'm like, that's not right. He's on. He's out of this game. So, was his game as a result of just the fact that he was there for like the minimum amount of time possible, and just kind of had to jump into it. And you think maybe he can do a little better, or I mean, think it's an advantage if he just has to run block more, that he's going to be probably decent, or what do we? And then I guess what do we expect as far as pass rush? Is that something that's going to be problematic for Rivers with this defense?
Sure. So, Veld here, now that we know his name, he looked really good. I didn't really know what to expect out of him. The guy was sitting on his couch 2 weeks ago. Obviously, he was working out. The guy looks like he's in great shape, but he was at home 2 weeks ago. He was not playing NFL football. He played NFL football for a long time, so the guy obviously knows what he's doing. But I was hopeful, but I was kind of like, oh, man, this guy's coming off his couch. Like in week 17, what are we going to get? He came out, and for the circumstances, I thought he played probably better than I expected him to. There were some times where he was getting beat around the edge in, the pass game, which is understandable. He is a vet that was on his couch. So, speed kind of got to him a little bit, but in the run game, the guy was really solid. Every single long run the Colts had, Velda was there, opening up a hole, making a key block. Really, the guy was excellent the entire game. As far as can he play better than he did? Yeah. A report came out that Basically, Quentin Nelson was telling him before every play what to do. Anytime you get to the line and the guy next to you, like, you have to be like, "Hey man, what do I do?" So, granted, it was high school, right? Way different level. But if you get up there and you're confused about the play call, or you're like me and you got hit real hard in the head on the last play, and you forgot what the play call was, and you got to look to the guy next to you and say, "Hey man, what do I do here?" It kind of puts a damper on it, because that guy across from me now knows what you're doing. He still has to execute and, beat what it is you're trying to do. But you did have an advantage before in that he didn't know what you were doing. So when Quentin Nelson looks at the left tackle and goes, "Hey man, you're going to do this and you're going to do that and you're going to go here," that does put them at a disadvantage. So Valdehier played really well with that.
Especially considering that he was telling everybody what he's going to be doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man.
So, he's going to have an advantage in that he's going to be more familiar. The guy's been around the NFL for a long time. So will the verbiage be different? Probably. But, if he knows, okay, this is the call for this protection. This is the call for this protection. When we combo block this, that's the call. So it's just going to be translating it for him. It's not going to be like it's foreign to him. He's going to be able to play better and get more comfortable when he knows what everyone's talking about, and Quentin Nelson doesn't have to tell him to play. Yeah, he can play better. I don't think that the Bills pass rush is inconsistent. They still have Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison. Not really worried about him rushing the passer. He's not a bad pass rusher, but he's not great. Ed Oliver is going to be really interesting to watch Oliver work. Oliver is explosive. He's really quick out of his stance. It's going to be fun to watch him and Quentin Nelson battle. I don't really want to see what he does on the other side of the line. I hope that they avoid that at all costs. And then another guy, Vernon Butler. He's a big guy up front. Vernon Butler has downs where Vernon Butler looks like I need to stop saying Vernon Butler. I just keep saying it over and over. I'm really sorry. Anyway, Vernon Butler, he has downs where he looks like just an absolute man beater. And then he has other downs where I see him and he's, getting double teamed 7 yards downfield. I'm like, dude, you literally threw a guard last play. What are you doing? I don't really get it with Vernon Butler. Again, I did it again. Oh my God. Butler, I don't get it with him. But he's capable of playing very well, but he is inconsistent.
You need to find out his middle name so you can use that while you say it too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do it now.
Then you mean business.
So basically, this defense, as far as the front seven, it seems like the Colts ought to have the advantage in terms of this group. But then we get to the secondary, and obviously that's a pretty significant part of the equation, and the talent level is much better when you get to the secondary. Is this a team that we think – are we going to try to pass the ball on this team at all? Or is it unlikely? Do we have a breakout game for Michael Pittman? Do we have T.Y. Hilton finding ways to beat this defense? What kind of coverages should we expect to see first, I guess? Or do they kind of vary that? Do they?
Sure.
What do we expect out of this defensive back
group?
So,
first, before I get to the question you just asked me, best I can tell, Vernon Butler does not have a middle name, but he is a junior, so he is Vernon Butler Jr. As far as coverage goes, these guys, they mix it up a lot, but I did notice that they played a lot of man coverage, and their defensive backs are really, really good. They do. I mean, there is a weak link, Levi Wallace. I know he got picked on a lot. Whereas number 39, real weird number for a corner for those of you that are really into player numbers. But Levi Wallace wears number 39, and if you're going to pick on a guy, it's going to be him. But other than that, you look at Tre'Davious White. I want to say he's an all-pro at corner. We're going to want to avoid him. Teron Johnson, he wears number 24. He got picked on a little bit, but he's also still a really solid player. They've got Josh Norman on this team, and Josh Norman isn't the same guy that he used to be. But based on what I saw the last few games over the season, every time I saw Josh Norman, he was either making a positive play, or he was in on, something positive. There wasn't a lot of negative. He wasn't giving up plays, not giving up catches. So between those guys, their corners, and then their safeties, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, those guys are excellent. They have a lot of good defensive backs. Their defensive backfield, this is one of the best defensive backfields I feel pretty comfortable saying in the league. Can the Colts throw on them? Sure. If Frank Reich's going to scheme some guys open, do I think that we have anybody that really can consistently win one-on-one against these guys? No, probably not. I mean, not unless you're going to scheme them open. You're going to run a bunch stuff and you're going to run guys underneath. And I just don't think that they can win consistently one-on-one without some serious scheming.
What about like discipline on these guys? Will play action. Do you think we can get any action off of play action at all? I mean,
sure. I think that you're more looking at what you can make the linebackers do there. I think that you're going to get, Edmonds especially, but Edmonds and Milano, you're going to get those guys to bite up because they're going to be trying really hard to stop the run, and then you're going to be able to fit things over top. It's just catching the Bills in the right coverage to do that. If they're running zone and, they're staying in their zones, and you run a guy up the seam, you have a guy running an in-breaking route, you have that play action, draw those linebackers up. Yeah, you're going to be able to move the ball that way for sure. But it's going to take well-timed play calls. It's going to take running the ball effectively, which, I think the Colts can do. And I have hope that they can move the ball that way, but I hope that it's not their main source of moving the ball.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I kind of did wonder about the tight ends a little bit, what role we ought to expect. They haven't done a whole lot with the tight ends because Jack Doyle has definitely lost a step in terms of his speed. He's actually been better over the past few weeks. And they have Mo Alley Cox has not done much. They seem to want to force the ball to Trey Burton.
I know you don't like Trey Burton, but Trey Burton is by far and away the best athlete we have at the position. So
I don't know. I can't.
I know you don't like him, but he's a good athlete, and we're lacking athletes there. So
I guess my hope, and we haven't seen it yet, and there's no reason to necessarily think this is the game that we do. My hope is that we see some Michael Pittman resurgence of the mid-season form that we saw with him. He's kind of disappeared a little bit. And I think that's probably pretty normal. There's very few rookie receivers who just blow it up. I would have hoped to see a little bit more from him, but also it takes everybody time to adjust. And I think it's a lot to put on somebody to expect them to have a Jonathan Taylor type season where you go from no off season to just this meteoric rise in a week span of time. Be great to see him as a big physical guy, be able to maybe make an impact and get some yards after the catch. But I hope, like you, that they don't have to rely too heavily on the passing game. Obviously, if they can run the ball successfully. Well, then one of the things, too, that we've seen with Frank, he's always far more creative as a play caller and far better if they're running the ball successfully because he's getting short yardage situations, and he's not afraid to take advantage of those. I think that as far as coaching goes, I feel confident about Frank Reich. I don't know that I would say he's like an advantage. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's going to have the advantage in coaching over the Bills coaching staff, which I think seems to be doing a really nice job. But I definitely think that he is a value. And I think that he, if anybody could scheme them open, he could. It'll be interesting. I'm certainly interested to see what the offense looks like. I don't know what to expect about Buffalo because I'm not sure that they've played a defense quite like ours, but also our defense is not geared to stop what they do best either. So it's going to be, I'm not really sure what to expect. It'll be one of those games that I think is going to make for an entertaining wild card game. Hopefully it's entertaining. Hopefully it's not one of those that you want to shut off halfway through. Yeah, I see where Shepard's going. We're going to get into this in here in a little bit, but let's get into some predictions. And my suggestion, which you went over like it went over interestingly in before we got started, was that it be a bet that you would make on what's going to happen in this game, that you would bet something you value on. I called it the mortgage bet, your mortgage prediction, because it has to be something that you would actually value and be willing to lose. What would you bet's going to happen in this game? And we're going to try not to be too boring, but there's a good chance that this is going to come out pretty vanilla ice cream, because we're not real bettors. So Jim, what is your mortgage prediction? Something you think is going to happen that you would actually be willing to to put up something of value on for this game?
I think that at some point in the game, the Colts will inexplicably run a highly telegraphed draw with Hines up the middle. And it will go for 0 yards.
I would think there's probably a good chance of that as well. Shepard?
Yeah, so I'm trying to come up with something that's good, that like I really think is actually probably going to happen, that isn't like completely lame. Not that yours was completely lame, Jim. That's not what I'm trying to say.
Oh, it was purposely lame.
Yeah, I'm just
that
saying
is lame
like,
that it happens too often.
I'm trying to play the game. I want to pretend like I got to put a lot of money, like enough money that I'm going to feel it financially on something happening. Okay, so this one makes me sad, but I think it's going to happen. I'm pretty sure that Phillip Rivers is going to throw a pick in this game.
All right, I don't like that very much.
No, me neither. But I think
it's interesting. I saw earlier. I saw this somewhere, and I haven't been able to track down the stat or where it came from. I remember it on Twitter. I should have saved it somewhere, but I believe maybe it's PFF. I don't know. Somebody tracks a stat called something to the effect of interceptable pass, it's something with aging interceptable balls that did not get picked off. So interceptions that are made versus interceptable throws, and I don't know how that stat is figured, so I'm not sure how reliable it is. I mean, I assume if a defensive back gets a hand on the ball, I know you're shaking your head, I'm going to ignore you and carry on.
I've seen this list also.
But Phillip Rivers and Josh Allen are very comparably listed in this. They have about the same number of interceptable
of lucky throws, basically.
Right. But
I mean, that's what it breaks down to.
This ball was pickable and was not picked. For what that
number one was Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth very little, because I think that also just means you can fit the ball in really tight windows sometimes if you're throwing a ball that they believe could possibly be picked. Sometimes
and also Patrick Mahomes doesn't care.
Right, and it could be that you have somebody like Travis Kelce who can just take the ball away, and so it seems like it's a pickable ball, but really you're relying on a supreme athlete to go get the ball. I don't really know how they figure those. So anyway,
the reason I was shaking my head was I actually saw a thread on Twitter too that kind of refuted that stat, and this thread came complete with GIFs. And they were like, this is not an interceptable pass according to this stat. And it was literally, I think it was Sam Darnold throwing a ball to a defender. It hit him in the hands and the ball hit the ground. And for some reason, they did not count that as an interceptable pass. So there were other examples too, but that one was the one that stuck with me. Like, I can see the play in my mind right now. I don't love that stat, but I understand it's probably a better measure of who throws a lot of bad passes, better than me just saying, that guy throws a lot of bad passes. So, it probably has more merit than just me sitting here saying that. But yeah, I just think to that Sam Darnold.
That's not winning you over, that stat.
Right, no. But I mean, it's probably fine. It's a fine stat, Blystone. Don't listen to me.
So for my prediction, and this is about as high as I'm comfortable going with this, because I feel pretty confident this is going to happen. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to rush for 100 yards and a touchdown. I think that if he doesn't, this game is going very badly, and I don't want to think that.
And you're moving out.
And I'll be moving out. Yeah. But I think that that's a fair assessment. I mean, the guy ran for 253 yards last week. The Colts run blocking has been very good in recent weeks. No reason to think that's going to change. And so I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption that he's going to have some success. And I also think that, the Colts are going to push the ball to him as much as they can. They're going to make that a focal point. He's been good. That's the thing that gives them probably the best chance to win. So it seems like a pretty safe bet that Jonathan Taylor's going to have a big game. Personally, I hope that he has a much bigger game than 100 yards and a touchdown. I hope that he's a much more of a problem for them. And I think he's able to, I don't know what he needs to do. And I guess maybe this is a good question for both of you. What would you say, Jim, you think, what would you say you think Jonathan Taylor needs to do stat-wise to get a win in this game? If we're saying that it's really not going to have much to do with the passing game, what kind of a game does Jonathan Taylor need for us to get a win?
I would say probably in at least 120 to 130 yards, probably 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. I could agree with that.
Quickly, like at least one of those needs to come, like first drive, make a point.
So
this is what we're about.
Yeah, I think probably I would be like in the 130 range, 130 yards, but it's got to be on like a lot of carries. Like give me just 4 yards every.
You don't want him to break off an 80-yard touchdown because then you're just Josh Allen.
Well, I mean, you still do because that's
right. It's not going to hurt my.
Then you just come back out and run it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm never going to be upset if you run back, if you run an 80-yard touchdown. I'm always going to be excited about that. But honestly, it is one of those where you need to have these long, methodical drives and keep the ball out of the hands of Josh Allen. And you need to have the defense. We're not talking about defense anyway. Anyway, that's my prediction. But let's now do some, because we've got our safe predictions. Let's go with our bold predictions. Let's go spicy here and get a little bit more ridiculous, where we don't have anything on the line for this one, so we can just say whatever we want because it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to hold us accountable for this, and we'll just say whatever we want to, except for somebody will probably remind me on Twitter, and I will just I'll own up to it. I don't mind. I'm wrong constantly, so I don't have a problem with being wrong, and it's fine if you tell me I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jim, bold, spicy, potentially last. We don't want to put any bad juju on the Colts, but potentially last bold prediction of the 2020 season.
I think that that the Colts will force 4 turnovers.
Oh man, that is very bold. That's very exciting if that happens.
Two of them comes from Kenny Moore.
Okay.
Dang. Now that would be a Kenny Moore game for the ages right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That is, nobody can say that is not bold.
For sure.
I mean, why don't
it's also probably completely wrong, but
why don't you just give Ben Bannick 5 sacks because in 5 snaps.
Just 5 snaps. Just 5 snaps, man.
That's a pretty bold one. All right, the gauntlet has been thrown down, Shepard. So I don't know how you could be more bold than that one. But
I can't. That's ridiculous.
It's stupid. But now it's going to happen.
Yeah, I hope.
That'd be fantastic. That would be, I mean, legitimately, that would probably they'd probably be running them out of the building.
I think we didn't scare everybody in
because
the playoffs at that point.
Yeah. So
it doesn't matter. I mean, if they get a win, regardless of how
true.
they do, they'll scare everybody.
Right. All right. So my bold prediction is going to seem way less bold, but I think there's actually a chance it could happen. I think Grover Stewart gets 2 sacks. This is finally the week.
Ooh.
Grover gets through for 2, just due to the fact he's going to get 1-on-1 and he's going to have a favorable matchup. So Grover, 2 sacks, big man busting through.
All right, excellent. I like it. I don't have one bold prediction, so I'm gonna go betting style. I'm gonna parlay here. I'm just gonna mash a bunch of predictions together to give myself almost no chance to make this happen. I think that this is gonna be a big game for Kamoko Toure. I think he's gonna have quite a few pressures, but I think he's going to get a sack and cause a turnover. So like a sack fumble. And he had a big game against Kansas City. He was the reason why in that game before he got hurt, he was the reason why the Colts were doing really well on defense in a large part. So I think he has a big game. I think that I'm going to predict the Colts hold Stefon Diggs under 100 yards.
All right, I thought mine was stupid.
Yeah, I'm gonna predict that they hold him under 100 yards, and I am going to predict that one other Colt has a turnover, but I'm going to be a wimp and I'm not going to say who. So I'm going to say Kamoko Trey with a strip sack. Fine, I'll say who. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to give it to Julian.
It's Blackman. George Odom.
I'm going to give it to Julian Blackman. Julian Blackman with a pick because he's bracketing Stefon Diggs in coverage and he takes the ball away. So I'm going to give it to Julian Blackman, Stefon Diggs under 100 yards and a strip sack for Kamoko Trey. All of these things would be very good for the Colts. If any of them happened, I would feel very good about that. So
yeah.
All right, now's the ugly time.
My prediction. So even better.
Absolutely. All right. So now's the ugly time of the show. We're gonna make game predictions, and I've just watched Shepard's face this whole time, so I know how this is gonna go for him. So Jim, I'm gonna let you start and let Shepard just think about what he's doing over here, because
I'm gonna keep going with my bold prediction, and I'm actually gonna predict that the Colts win this game 32-28.
32. That's an interesting scoreline.
Yep. It's going to be a weird game.
28. All right. Somebody's getting a safety?
Yep.
Is there going to be safety involved or something that's going to throw off the score and make it all wild? All right. Or return like a 2-point conversion for a touchdown. We've done that. I'm
going to count safety as my turnover.
There you go. Well, I think that would be fair. I would award you that. That would count. All right, Shepard.
Final score is going to be 38-17. The Colts aren't going to win, guys. I want them to. Real bad. Colts lose 38-17.
Well, that was depressing. Okay, so let me go over here and look at this. I gotta take one more little look-see over here because
the Bills have been averaging 46 points a game like the last 5 games, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna hold them to 28.
Well, I'm just looking over here to see because the Colts have scored 17 points or less just one time this season. That was against the Baltimore Ravens.
I'm telling you,
an aberration of a game. I don't think that there is any way that this defense is going to hold the Colts that low of a score. Whether you think they win or lose is one thing, but I think your score line is nonsense, sir.
Okay.
Mine is actual nonsense. His is probably right.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick differently than Shepard because I'm not such a Debbie Downer here.
Believe me, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you guys are right.
I think. Okay, so here's the problem that anybody who's listened to this show for any amount of time knows that I don't pick with my head, I pick with my heart. So I am going to shut down the brain part of my brain, and I'm going to pick the Colts to win this game. I think it's going to be a tough game. Yeah, just all of it. I'm just literally going to die. You just see me slump over, and that's the end of the knowing all of you. I think that this is going to be a very close game, but I think this is going to be a game where the defense does something that hasn't been. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of hype. They have beaten down a lot of teams over the last month, but those teams haven't been great teams. And yeah, they beat the Steelers, and that's certainly fair. But I think this is going to be one of those games. It's going to be, I'm going to say 27-28. I think Colts get a win, barely squeak one out. Keep them. I mean, if they could hold them to 27 points, that's a huge win, I think. And I think the Colts are very capable of scoring that. But I think if they can get a couple of takeaways, which is also one of my predictions, I think that puts them well within that as a reality if Jonathan Taylor has a really good game. I know that'll be a long shot. They always are in the wild card round, but I think that it's definitely a winnable game. And I mean, it just depends on the team that shows up. If the Colts team that we have seen occasionally shows up, if they play a whole game, if Shepard's conspiracy theory about Frank Reich turns out, maybe he's just been waiting the whole season to uncork a playoff playbook. And he's just going to be like,
to be fair to my conspiracy theory, the play calling did get way better about halfway through the season. I think I was right.
Well, I mean, and so if we end up seeing, the Colts uncork some plays for the playoffs that they haven't yet, there could be some interesting things in there. They've played well. I don't know. Xavier Rhodes has played really well. He could definitely have a pick. I mean, there's all kinds of talent on this defense that they need to do things they haven't done consistently over the past few weeks, and we'll see if they can. But yeah, if not, that will suck. But also, on the whole, this year has been a really fun year to watch Colts football. So, but that's all for us, guys. We'll be back in one way or the other to commiserate with one another and feel bad if it's a loss, or brag endlessly if any of our bold predictions happen to work out. You'll never hear the end of it. And yeah, I mean, we have had fun doing this podcast over the season. We're not going to stop doing that in the off season, but we hope that isn't going to come just yet. So hopefully we got another week of this. We'll be back on probably Wednesday to give some kind of a game recap and a look ahead at what's going on for the Colts, whatever that may be. You can check out content on Stampede Blue. Lots of good stuff going up there all the time. Obviously, you can check out Shepard's scouting reports if you want to get a visual aid to go with all the stuff we've talked about. You can obviously jump back and check the podcast that we released last week or earlier in the week that had a lot more detail about the Bills' specific players. If you kind of want to know more about them in depth, you can hear them from the perspective of a guy who follows the Bills really closely. And you can follow us on Twitter at Chris Blystone, at NFL Scheme, and at Jim Campbell 81, and heckle us endlessly. We always appreciate that. And I'm thinking of diverting. I usually respond in terms of office gifts to everything that annoys me, but I'm probably going to start merging over into Brooklyn Nine-Nine gifts because those are also pretty fantastic. Mm-hmm. I just started discovering some really great ones. So if you annoy me, I'll send, funny gifts to you, and you can think that I am not annoyed, or you can realize that I'm just being very passive aggressive with you. Also go rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening. If you're checking us out on YouTube, subscribe to that channel. We certainly appreciate it. We're going to do some on this next show, win or lose, whatever happens in this next show. We're going to try to do a live Q&A show so we can answer some more questions that you may have and talk some more Colts football. But until then, guys, that's all we got. And we'll catch you later. Hopefully, go Colts. Yeah.
Enjoy the Civil War, guys. Bye.
Yay! Civil War 2.0 Boogaloo!